I know from experience that you're excellent at not just maintaining the author's voice, but you enhance it. How do you do that? Because it's incredible.
Well, thank you for that. Oh, goodness. I think it's something that just comes out of reading. A lot of reading to back books. You know, I finish a book and I go right into the next one. And there's usually not a pause because reading is part of my daily ritual, so I go through a lot of books that way. And I just kind of developed this ability to switch voices and characters consistently. And then I guess I can take that into my editing, and then when I'm reading an author's work, I can just slip myself into their style, into their tone, into their voice. It does take, you know, I generally do a couple of read-throughs before I start editing, just for that specific purpose, so I can into the mode of characters and the setting and the tone of the piece. And then I just try and, because the biggest part of editing is not to put too much of yourself to what you're editing. It has to sound like the author, or else people will read a paragraph and say, why does that sound so different than the one before it? So it's just all kind of fun, really, is taking on all these different voices and all these different points of views and making sure that if you're inserting something, that it sounds like it belongs.
That to me sounds like a wonderful rebuttal to some of the concerns you hear from new authors, that their author voice will be lost during editing. And it's simply not the case with a good editor, because it is so much goes into editing. There's a reason why I reached out to find an editor in the first place, and that is one of the things that definitely it comes through. And it's great to hear about how much work you put into finding that author's voice for everyone you edit, doing the read-throughs beforehand. That's incredible.
It's really one of the goals of having a finished manuscript that you edited, is without the track changes turned on, for the author to not be able to tell what the difference between what they've written and then what you've written. So it all just flows and it all sounds like the author. I mean, that's the main goal, and it's very hard to achieve, but it's what you strive for.
I wonder if this also plays into why you're such a great editor. You're also a ghostwriter. What's something that you enjoy about ghostwriting?
Best thing about ghostwriting is that there's a certain freedom that comes from not having to do the drudgery of, you know, the outline, the character sketches, bring out the chapter timelines, and because, you know, the authors, those who want the story written, present me with that. All I have to do is just take what they've given me and write it. I don't have to think about any of it. So it's just, I just get to do the fun part, which is just to be creative and bring these scenes to life, but I don't have to worry about the details about these scenes, where they should fit in the character's arc and with the plot line. It's that's really something that's under the author's purview, whereas I just get right, which is, you know, why I do it. So
there were a couple times before I wrote my own books that I played with the idea of being a ghostwriter, but I felt like I needed to be able to completely change everything. I guess I needed more control.
Books that are really research heavy, there's not a lot of room for the person you're writing for to not like it or to want to change it, because, you know, you're stating the facts, and what you write kind of revolve around facts that are. In the more creative works, which is, you know, one of the hard parts of ghostwriting, is that you can think you just write an awesome, amazing scene, not a thing needs to be changed, and then you send it to the author. They come back and they don't like it. They want it all changed, and it's one of the not so great sides of ghostwriting is that your work is under constant scrutiny, and that could be, you know, mean good things or mean not great things. Because these people are relying on you to bring their vision to life, and so if it's not as good as they want it to be, then a lot of rewriting has to happen.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. So this is kind of, I guess, connected in a sense, because you mentioned to me that you were working on, you were co-authoring a book. Is that, because I mean, I have never worked with another author. I've only done my own work. What is that like co-authoring?
Co-authoring in this sense was author with a finished manuscript came to me and knew that it needed help. And so he asked me if I'd be interested in tightening it up, working on the storyline, working on some of the plot elements, get it to publishable. And throughout the course of me working on this manuscript, kind of developed a back and forth relationship where we would bat ideas back and forth, and then I started adding my own writing into it. I'd write scenes or chapters that we discussed, and so it kind of just evolved from evaluating and editing and developmentally editing this manuscript to becoming a co-author, because so much of my own writing was going into it that it kind of fell into place that way.
That's great. And I mean, as I was listening to that, I was thinking that I may have, in a sense, I kind of misspoke with saying I've never worked with a co-author, because not necessarily co-author, but editing is a collaborative process with a good editor. The rise and stand are what they are because of what you did as an editor with it, and we worked collaboratively on scenes, on sentences, on everything. So there is a collaborative nature of that too, even with working with an editor, which is why I wanted to find an editor that I could have a long-term strong relationship with, because I knew it was going to be a collaborative process for not just one book but multiple books. And it's definitely one of those where you're back and forth, and you know, there's notes and change this or don't change this, and working together, like, does this need to change or does it need to stay the same, and even rewriting entire paragraphs, pages, to based on the perspective of you, the editor, and my perspective as the author. So it is still a collaborative process. I guess just taking co-author, it takes it further than that. Does that sound right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just when they're both collaborative, but when I start writing chapters on my own that we've agreed on, and it's when you say it like that, it does seem like kind of a fine line between editing and co-authoring, because the original idea was his, but then together we kind of came up with something similar, his original idea, yet hopefully a little improved.
Well, that leads into a good question, because when we talk about editing, not all editing is created equal. So there's different types of editing. And so I wondered if you could give a little bit of advice on the different types of editing, like copy, line editing, and content editing, and see how an author should approach them, and what if they're looking at, well, I feel like my manuscript needs this type of editing. How should they look at it that way?
Yeah, it's always nice when an author comes to you with their manuscript and has done their homework on what these different edits entail, and then tell you what they think there's needs. It's also hard because, you know, our manuscripts are like our children. Most part, they need more work than we think that they do, because, you know, they're ours. So usually if I'm looking at a manuscript and the narrative is mature and it's put together nice and there's a flow, and because you can usually tell when a draft and when a manuscript has been gone over several times thoughtfully by an author that has some writing or some intuitive writing under their belt. That's the kind of manuscript where it's mostly grammatical or syntax. The edits are in nature. That would constitute a line or a copy edit, which is kind of minimal commentary from me. It's just cleaning up the grammar and the mechanical aspects of the manuscript. Then the heavier editing is the heaviest is the developmental. I get sent a manuscript and it has notable plot holes, or it lacks clarity and cohesion, and the characters aren't very well developed, and they don't have an arc, and the plot timeline is kind of all over the place. That would mean a developmental edit. My part. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Talking about like that developmental editing, one thing, there's a couple different terminologies used for this, but alpha readers, beta readers, sensitivity readers. What are your thoughts on authors seeking out? I mean, and it's a little difficult because generally those aren't people that are paid. It's a lot of times it's friends, family. So sometimes it can be overly kind, I think, and sometimes they may not be looking for the same things. I am very lucky that in Stand, I had a phenomenal alpha reader who he pointed out some very big plot holes I had and helped me tie that up before I even sent it to you. I have yet to be able to find a sensitivity reader, but that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to for my future books. But what do you think about authors seeking them out? And then do you have any advice for authors who would be seeking out those kind of readers before going to an edit? Potentially trying to avoid developmental editing, I guess.
Right. Alpha and beta readers are massively important because, and I think generally they should be, if you can, people that don't know you very well. That's just like you say, you know, you finish a manuscript and you send it to your mom and she reads it and says, I love it. You know, that's generalizing that, but if you can find like a writers group that write in your genre, or that kind of, you know, kindred spirits in the literary realm, then alpha and beta readers can do just like you said, find the plot holes, in the gaps in the timeline, and they can be invaluable. But as an author, you also should have a firm grasp on your own voice and your story and the core of it and why you wanted to write it in the first place. Because a lot of times, alphas and betas can give you suggestions that take your book farther afield from how you first envisioned it. You have to kind of be aware of that when you're sending your manuscript out to alphas and betas.
That's great advice. Yeah, I definitely, when I first started, I was in I'm in a couple writers group now, and those were the first people that were alpha and beta readers. And like you say, there were some that were very helpful, and there were some that tried to create it into their own work in a sense. But it's definitely one of those things that I felt was invaluable in creating a coherent story and characters that made sense. I still remember very early on, one of them told me that all of my characters in their dialogue sounded the same. That was one of their tips, was basically like, you need to find ways to make it clear that this is not the same person speaking. And I think one of the ways that I tried to do that personally was take away the dialogue tags in a lot of the cases, and can I tell that it's not the same person? And it doesn't mean that everyone has to have some crazy dialect or something like that, but just, slight quirks and differences in their speaking.
That's a great exercise. I'm going to remember that one. Taking out the speech tags and seeing if you can discern who's talking. That's a great idea.
Thank you.